would go and visit with her, and I saw the way that those black students were being treated once they came out. And so I began to be an advocate for them, and an advocate for, in particular, for those white students, to help them understand that the students that they were in the classroom that they were looking at and strange were in fact kids just like them. Right. With the hopes that as they began to matriculate together through the system, that they would develop relationships and friendships, so that the community that I have lived in all of my life would be a better community. I particularly wanted them to understand when their time would come to have to come to the inner city, that they didn't need to be afraid, that they could come because they were coming to be with friends. I did not know when I started that there would be about a 6-block radius within Old South Nashville that was adverse toward kids with asthma. Because when it came time for them to come in, most of them could not come in. They stayed at Dotson because they had asthma, and they couldn't travel that far into sick. Now, it didn't, the zone stopped there on 21st, because they could go to what was Aiken School. If they got in Aikens, where you had Vanderbilt folks who were going, it was all right. But if you had to go to Johnson or Merle, then you could not come in because they had asthma. And so I began to advocate and to begin to get involved in the schools, because one day I was hoping that we would have children, and when they started the school, I wanted the school system to be fixed by the time they got there. I'm still working 40 years later trying to fix the school system, so that maybe one day when I have grandkids, that they will be able to go to the kind and be in the kind of place. But I want to contradict a couple of things that I've already heard today. Our school system, and I'm only speaking in regards to Nashville, that's when I was a part of our chapter NAACP Education Committee, and when I was president of our branch here, I made it my business to go into every one of our schools. And during the course of every year, I was in each building at some point and some time addressing the issues around equity and excellence that needed to take place in our schools. I was there. I was involved. Our school system today is exactly at the place where our community wants our schools to be. Our schools reflect exactly what our leadership and our community wants for our schools, and we need to quit beating up on ourselves and on some of our educators, because our schools reflect exactly what's happening in our community. If you look at Nashville, Jill was just talking about moving back. The Nashville that I grew up in no longer exists. It is a completely different Nashville. And the folk of whom I have advocated and who I have pushed for are continuously being pushed farther and farther to the margins. That we We had a superintendent of school, Dr. Benjamin, was talking about education reform and moving forward. And I told Dr. Benjamin, this was some 20 years ago, I said, Dr. Benjamin, what you want is not better students, you want better parents.
That's right.
Because now when we look at our school system, all these issues around choices and all of these programs that we're talking about are all designed to continue to maintain the gap that is there.
Right.
We do not want to narrow the gap.
Right.
Because in order to narrow the gap, we've got to want to narrow the gap within our community.
Right.
The chasm that exists between the haves and the have-nots in Nashville is getting wider.
Yeah.
I love how Mr. Green earlier was talking about this divide, and we got a bridge, and we need to have a bridge between the haves and the have-nots. We have constructed the bridge, but we've got a segment of kids in our communities, and I think it's roughly around 7,500 kids, of whom they will never be able to cross that bridge.
What you talking about?
Because we don't want them on the other side of the bridge.
Wow.
And what has happened is we don't have the folk who are in the system with any numbers to make a significant difference to look into the eyes of those 7,500 kids and to say, you can get on that bridge.
Right.
When I was growing up, my mother had a friend who was a teacher, in my middle school. And when she was in school, Green was talking about being a disciplinarian. When she was in school, she was always one of whom was, in fact, we used to say tough. She was hard. She was hard because she had expectations.
Right.
All right.
But nobody had a problem with the expectations.
That's right.
Because we knew
That's
that
right.
she loved you.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing to be disciplined and be corrected or be redeemed. When you are being redeemed by somebody that cares for you.
Right.
But when you are not being cared for, then you can't get past the fact that it feels like, and it is, punitive.
Come on.
That's right. You're exactly right.
I used to, she played bridge with my mother, and so there were times that I would go by the house and I would see, and one time, every time I would go, I would always notice that she had a can of Leo peppermint.
Royal
Leo
Leo
peppermint.
in that tent right there. Yep.
I said to her, one time I said, you must love Leo peppermint. You got this peppermint all the time, and you even had a can of it in at school. And then she told me that she had come to Tennessee State from, I believe it was Gates or someplace down in West Tennessee. And when she came, they had scraped up all of the money that they could to be able to send her to school. And when it came time for Christmas, she didn't have enough money to go home. In fact, she had to raise some money to go to school, and so she would stay in the holidays and work for white folk in Belle Meade during their holiday seasons to be able to get some stuff. And for Christmas, that first semester that she was here, her mother and father sent her a can of Leo peppermint.
Hallelujah.
That was her Christmas present. And she said, there would be times that I would not have enough money to get anything to eat. And I would take one of those Leo peppermints and remember the sacrifices that my parents made in order for me to go.
All right.
And I would know for the sweetness of that candy to remind me of the opportunities that I had and that I had to take full advantage of. She said, I kept that candy in my classroom because this was before the days of free lunch and all of those kinds of expenditures. And there would be kids that would come to school sometime who would not have anything to eat. She said, I always kept in my in my desk drawer a thing of peanut butter and crackers. This was, this is how long ago it was. This was before kids had peanut allergies.
Right.
I mean, they were too poor to have allergies. And she would provide for them some peanut butter and crackers and one of the peppermint sticks to remind them that somebody cared about them. See, what's missing in the system today is that we don't have enough folk who have sat down and understood the trials of getting to where they are to serve as an inspiration for those young folk to be able to move forward. We don't have folk.
You got it.
Green also said one of those things about this assessment, and it made me think something about, said, well, we don't complain about the football players or the basketball players who go and have the assessment. They don't mind the assessments because they know the assessments are getting them somewhere. One of the real tragedies of integration is that we, in coming in order to be able to come together, they had to tear down our institutions.
Well, come on. Come
on. So that they could justify not giving them the positions that those folk should have had in the first place. So they said, well, no, somehow this degree from this place is better from this degree in the other place. We are slowly, it is just about the time. All this was happening in the 70s. They have spent the last 40 years still putting down our institution, putting down folk. I remember one of the biggest arguments I had in the director's office was when they were talking about going around and recruiting. And when we recruit black teachers,
come on now,
we have to recruit the best.
Right.
And they said, well, we go and we're going to Hampton and we're going to Morris, we're going to Morehouse and we're going over to Dillard and we're trying to recruit the very best. I said, well, guess what? They're not coming.
That's right.
come on.
Have you gone to Morgan State?
Right.
Have you gone to St. Louis University?
Come on now.
Have you gone to recruit folk who understand? Because, see, those kids are not going to go to the Napiers, and they're not going to go to the university. They're not going to go deal with our kids. But those folk who are looking for the opportunities and looking for the advantages of going out, you bringing in and recruiting them and taking them to a night at the Grand Ole Opry.
Right.
Take them on Jefferson Street or on Buchanan where they will know how to get their hair fixed.
All right.
You don't understand because they need to be able to understand what it means to come into a community because they are then going to look at those kids as being a part of the community and being connected with. We are not... got Miss Lovett, Dr. Lovett, who is here. And she can remember how difficult and how challenging we said, look, in order for us to be able to have our kids being taught by folks who can relate to them. We tried to create a program at her school. She was the principal. Well, she wasn't then, but she moved to McKissick to create that kind of program. Those kind of programs didn't get the level of funding.
That's right.
Come on.
That's right.
Because they didn't want to believe in a place like Tennessee State University.
That's right.
Because they wanted to be able to have all of this. So yes, today we've got some of the best qualified teachers. We've got some of the best assessments and all of the things we have. But what we are missing in our school system are people who respect those kids
That's
And
right.
their families.
and their families.
Mm-hmm.
Who can sit. I'm almost 63 years old. I'm still asking the question because I still understand the problem. And when a kid tells me they got put out of school, the first thing I ask them, no, that's not the first thing I ask them. First thing I ask them, who put you out? Somebody black or white?
There you go.
What?
There you go.
Shut
All
the
right.
front door.
If they say it's somebody black, I say, what'd you do wrong? If it's somebody white, I said, who is it so I can go check and find out why? Because we still are dealing with those things. It's the same issue is that the kids knocked out some windows in Baltimore and they called out the National Guard.
Right.
Some white boys got to shooting one another down
in Waco.
in Waco,
That's
Hundreds
right.
of them.
That's right. They said it was
and they ain't called nobody.
That's right. There was a misunderstanding.
A misunderstand.
The challenge for us, if we are going to ever get to that point of where that gap that we want to talk about is significantly narrowed, it is going to be that we're going to have to invest in our community.
Yes, yes, yes.
I
But
agree.
the key indicator for success is the economic level of the homes in which they stay in.
Come on now.
The middle class in black middle class in Nashville was built on education.
That's right.
It was built on the folk who went to Tennessee State and Fisk and Meharry. It was built on the schools where we were serving.
That's right.
And our kids are not going to see the assessment when they can't see themselves ever getting in the jobs
Yeah,
and
that's
being
right.
in the places
That's
in
right.
our Nashville.
That's right.
That somehow we've got to challenge the system because we as black folk don't have that kind of capital that we can go and start a business. We have had to use the access that has been assured through the government. We've got to make sure when we look at that. This was about 10 years ago, we were hiring more teachers coming out of Free Will Baptist College here in town than we were out of Tennessee State.
Wow.
That is a travesty.
That's right.
That when we look at issues and we got to tie them all together, when we look at what's happened to our union representation, the MNEA doesn't matter anymore because they have de-emphasized the importance of that. When we have outsourced jobs, when we took away the janitors who were making salaries enough to be able to have their kids and provide for their kids, then when you put them now where they don't make enough money to be broke,
Wow.
it would be great if we would have the kind of inclusionary zoning. It would be great if we would have the living wage that exists within our city. All of those things would help contribute to make things better. But because we don't and we don't have the political will, we do not need our school system participating in the marginalization and the disenfranchisement of the family.
That's right. That's right. Okay. Okay.
And it would start by making sure that we have the kind of investment in pre-K programs.
That's right. That's where it's got to go.
And we've got to also start employing within our school system folk and people who come through our school system.
That's right. That's right.
That when you look at Nashville, what 1,500 jobs being added a month, and 85% of those jobs being from people who have come outside of Nashville, coming into Nashville. Those are the folk who want the choices. And the main choice they want to know is, how can I avoid going to school with this certain population?
That's right, that's it, that's it.
And how we employ and how we equip the people who are willing to be like my old teacher. To look in their eyes, to know that they're hungry.
Yes.
To be able to, I get on my daughter about this all the time. I told my daughter's been teaching 11 years. I said, you've been teaching 11 years and you have yet to go to a home of a student.
What?
Because it's discouraged by the administration. So she said, that's why I got you, Dad. So you can go. And leave with this last little bit. And she had a student last year. She's the hard ass teacher in the building. She gets all of the rough boys in particular. She does not do very well with privileged kids. Though she was a privileged kid.
The bad to talk.
She loves those kids that nobody else wants.
That's right.
And particular boys. She loves them little hard ankle boys. She had a young man who had already been in 2 classrooms, and they were about to get to the point to expel this boy because he was a behavioral nightmare for the school. And she said, and they said, well, I'll tell you what, we'll give him to you, and they'll put you at 21. They'll put you over the size of everybody else. So we're going to take 3 away from you so you can handle that one. She said, no, that's not fair for the other ones I've gotten into shape. Don't take away, you're not going to take away 3 bad ones. You're going to take away 3 good ones to give to this new teacher who's having struggle communicating with the kids in the neighborhood. Right. So no, I'll take him anyway. So the kid comes in, the kid's trying to do all the kind of stuff. And she said, Daddy, talk to me. And I was talking to him, and here was a kid who had no sense of belonging anywhere. Found out that here is a young man who was 7 years old that spent 4 days in the house with his dead mother.
Oh my.
Who had overdosed, but she had overdosed a lot of times before and passed out. So he was accustomed to her just being in her room by herself. And because it was on the weekend and he was accustomed to going in the refrigerator and feeding and doing all the stuff, he took care of all of the responsibilities he had been doing all along while she laid in there. And it wasn't until her sister came over on that Monday to find out why they